Welcome to the American Experiment Radio. Today we have Justin Mishler. He's a former U.S. Marine assisting the Ukraine in their war against Russia. He is dedicated in his life promoting liberty, freedom, and fighting for justice. Justin believes that individuals can make a difference by standing up for what is right. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
So, Justin, could you start by sharing your personal story, about your life and how you became a Marine?
Sure. I grew up in a small town. I don't think if anybody knows it, Belvedere, in Illinois, just south of Wisconsin. It's a real small town, so a lot of kids in that town after they graduate high school join the service. And I think I decided I was going to join the military when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And it was me and a buddy that I've known since I was like 5 or 6. And we decided that we were going to, do a lot of classes early on in high school to graduate as early as possible, so we didn't miss the global war on terrorism. So we ended up graduating half a year early and had already enlisted in the Marine Corps that previous summer in between our junior and senior year. And so we graduated December of 2010 and left for recruit training in January of 2011 and had a pretty good time. Me and him both ended up going to 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and got to do an Afghanistan deployment that was from like February to September of 2012. And if anybody has seen Vet TV, that guy, I was in 2nd Platoon. That guy was our weapons platoon commander. And he had he had a book about an operation we were on and TV shows based on stuff that we did and that kind of thing. And that was pretty fun.
Okay. So what ignited your interest in the Marine Corps? And how did that mold your, as you as a person that you are today?
So I think the thing that taught me about the Marine Corps was I remember one night I was talking to my mom and she had gained a little bit of weight. I said, "Mom, you're gaining some weight. You're gaining enough weight now. You can probably beat up Dad." And she was like, "There's no way I could do that. He was in the Marine Corps." And I was like, "What is that?" And fucking couple weeks after that, I was already purchasing the Full Metal Jacket movie with Arlie Ermey, the Vietnam era movie, and then just really delved into it. After that, I was probably maybe 10 or 11 years old. And that was also right when we invaded Iraq. So I watched the invasion of Iraq on TV with my dad. And then after that, the Battle of Fallujah, watched that on TV with my dad. And that's right when the History Channel and the Military Channel were producing good content, not Forgotten Weapons, but Future Weapons. Deadliest Warrior, Special Ops Mission Show on the Military Channel. A lot of good stuff at that time for people like me.
Great. So while serving in the Marines, are there any particular encounters that you had? Like you said, you were in Afghanistan and now you're in Ukraine. So are there any particular events, especially from Afghanistan? We'll come to Ukraine later.
Sure, yeah. Afghanistan was pretty interesting, I'd say. There was a lot of instances. I don't know how much we can delve into the not safe for work style in this kind of venue. But I've seen just about everything at that time, including all the stereotypical Afghan things. I mean, at that point, I was still trying to help the standard Afghan civilian gain freedom, and also at the same time trying to help the U.S. keep terrorism in the Middle East and not have it happen, like 9/11 happened in the U.S. Because I think that was a big shock for everybody.
Yeah. So where were you stationed in Afghanistan?
So I was in the Helmand province, technically the Musa Kala district, sometime in the Kijaki district, and I think maybe a little bit of time in the Nowzad district, which were all former British controlled districts in Helmand that the U.S. Marine Corps took over. I want to say 2009, maybe 2010.
Yeah, I think they had the most, U.S. had the most casualties in Helmand, right? Pretty
Yeah,
much that was the
obviously.
most difficult state they had to deal with over there. And by the way, my
Yeah,
grandmother.
Helmand was pretty busy. The other ones were, on the border with Pakistan. Those were also pretty busy. But
Yeah.
for the Marine Corps specifically, Helmand was very busy. The Sangin district, Musikela, Kajaki, that was that.
Okay, so let's talk about. So you came back to after the war in Afghanistan. You came back to the U.S. So is that when you joined the Liberty Movement? Like, can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So I went to college at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, and I told myself when I was getting out, because I'm still very pro-war, that if I saw any anti-war protesters, I would go yell at them. One day I was walking in like I guess the quad or whatever in between like the library and the student center and all that kind of thing, and saw some kids, protesting about war, and I came over and yelled at them, and I was yelling at them pretty good. They're like, "No, brother, come on, man, we're pro weed, we're pro gun, like." Or whatever. And I was like, you guys are full of shit. Like, there's no way you fucking hippie ass commies are pro gun and pro weed and all this stuff. I'm like, no, brother, we're with Young Americans for Liberty.
I don't know if you could put this in there, but
Yeah.
I think it's still happening. Like, y'all is pretty much anti-war right now, also, which is most libertarians are anti-war.
Yeah, sure. But so I talked to those kids, and I ended up going to like a college chapter meeting or whatever. And eventually, I was the president of Yale at NIU, like a year later, 2 years later.
Didn't just moving on from the y'all conversation, like you've done so many campaigns for them, but while you were in college, didn't Hillary Clinton like tweeted a picture of you and called you like extremist? Is it domestic extremist or something? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So that was, of course, in 2020 when I was doing all the Michigan protests. And at that point, I'd been at college for like 3.5 or 4 years. And I had stopped going to college because at that time, like I think most other colleges, if not every other college, NIU was just going online. I didn't want to waste my time just going to school online when I couldn't hold meetings for Yale. And I was also at that time president of the Student Veterans Association on campus. And I couldn't hold meetings for either of the organizations I was president of. And I'm like, I'm not going to waste my worrying about schoolwork when I'm trying to help these people, And so then I decided personally that I was going to try to, retain freedom and gain freedom for everybody across the country. So in 2020, I, probably spent $10,000 of my own money, days and days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks of my own time, driving to different protests, engaging in different protests, including in Michigan and Wisconsin and Texas and Virginia. I think that might be it. But like a lot of the famous protests, I engaged myself in, including like the big Virginia gun rally, and I was in Kenosha for the Rittenhouse thing.
You were there while it was happening, or was it after?
Yeah, so I was like 10 minutes away from where it happened. But like I was in Kenosha the first night when they burned down that used car lot. I was there for that. I was there in Kenosha the next night. I was in Kenosha the next night, and then I was in Rittenhouse was from Antioch, Illinois, and I was in Antioch the night after the shootings because BLM and Antifa were supposed to attack the town. So I was there for that. I was in Austin, Texas for the Garrett Foster stuff. It was, just a busy year.
Was that Garrett Foster? Was that your first campaign that you worked on, or?
No, Garrett Foster was that he was a kid who was shot by that Uber driver.
Oh yeah.
And I think if I remember right, Austin is Travis County, maybe Texas.
Yeah.
And Garrett was part of, I think, the Travis County Libertarian Party at the time. And people were like, oh, he's a communist, he's Antifa, he's BLM. And I'm like, no, he was just a fucking libertarian kid pushing his quadriplegic around because she wanted to be at the protest. And obviously, as we all believe, the Second Amendment and all that stuff. He was open carrying his AK, and that's not a fucking issue unless you're, looking for somebody to shoot. And that Uber driver was just looking for somebody to shoot, and chose him, unfortunately. And it was a bit of, veteran on veteran. Definitely could have been avoided if people were smarter than they should be.
Yeah, definitely.
Completely.
So
Completely.
okay. So is like I'm trying to like just figure out the timeline because we worked on campaigns together. We
Sure.
were in Georgia. That's where I met you. Like, and was it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm just like I just can't remember where we met. What was the name of the city?
It was right by Fort Benning.
Yeah. Oh my God, like that campaign was just like the worst campaign I've been on, as in for like the candidates, like Loeffler and Perdue. Maybe Perdue.
It was on the Chattahoochee River. I remember that because Alabama was right there.
Yeah. So was that your first campaign? It wasn't with Young American Food.
No,
It was with MTM.
No, the first one was Zach Payne in Indiana. So I went right from Zach Payne in Indiana and took like a week or two break, and then came out of Georgia for that.
Oh, okay. So how was that experience like? So you worked with like different organizations. Which one do you like kind of prefer, or which campaign you had the most fun at?
I think, obviously I've had fun in all the campaigns, including like the one we did last fall.
Oh yeah, New Hampshire is the best place to knock, or should say the Vietnam of
New Hampshire. New Hampshire was nice because I had that house with the hot tub. That was pretty cool. But
was that on near the seashore?
No, I was in Barnstead.
Oh, okay. They kept moving you too, right? I was there too. Like they moved me a bit, not that much, but yeah, it was pretty. It's just the people that you're around, like make your experience better. All my like I would say, like pretty much all my campaigns were pretty nice. It's just the candidates that sometimes I had the issue with, not with y'all, mostly with MTM.
I think, I like Indiana the best because that was like my first one, and we like beat like a. You heard about the Zach Payne campaign when we beat that guy that was like a 20-year incumbent,
and it was
like very corrupt.
It was pretty close though, right? Because I heard a lot.
I don't know. I think we blew him out of the water. I think we won by like I want to say like 3 or 4 or 5 points, maybe 6.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, we fucking blew that guy out of the water.
I'm trying to think where I was at that time because I wasn't in that campaign.
We had a lot of campaigns going at that time.
Okay, so do you see what kind of hurdles do you see with the liberty movement? Because I know that you kind of stand in the middle, like you're maybe a little conservative, you're in the middle, like you're conservatarian a bit, right? So how do you see the libertarian movement? Like, do you see what are some of the obstacles that they have?
So the thing I see with the libertarian movement is we're great on domestic policy. We're for 100% freedom.
Yeah.
When it comes to domestic policy, whether it be, Second Amendment stuff, First Amendment stuff, like we're just trying to make sure that everybody has as much chance in life as everybody else. You know what I mean? And as minimal government interference as we can. But where the liberty movement loses a lot of people, including me, and I get really mad about foreign policy.
Yeah, because libertarians are non-interventionists. Yeah, I think that was one of my reasons of. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that people, if they care about people's freedom domestically, they should care about people's freedom, internationally. And when I've seen stuff, because I've been in Ukraine again now the second time since December. So like when the Libertarian Party teamed up with like the Communist Party and had people like they tried to get Scott Ritter in at it and a bunch of other folks at the Rage Against the War rally in DC. I think it was in I want to say February.
Yeah. I think Ron Paul spoke there too.
Ron Paul spoke there too, but he's getting old, and I don't really blame him.
Okay, so the deal with the Libertarian Party, they don't want they don't want to interfere in foreign wars. This was the thing that attracted me about the Libertarian movement. That's why I joined the Libertarian movement. To be honest about it. For example, I wanted to ask you about the U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan, and maybe that should be that's where should we lead our conversation. But just imagine if America was never involved in Afghanistan. We would not have to deal with what happened when they left, for example. They always.
I'll get into Afghanistan here in a second, because we had a really interesting thing happen yesterday. I don't know if you saw in the news, where, I mean, you could obviously tell that we're still there. But I mean, Ron Paul being an anti-war thing, Ron Paul's cool. He didn't shirk his duty. He was, I want to say, an Air Force flight medical officer or flight medic at one time in the 60s.
Yeah.
So he didn't, he actually, went along and played like I think everybody should. But from Vietnam until now, I have issues with how American civilians have thought about war and how they've reacted to war, because I think they're a little bit coddled, and they live in kind of a luxurious life where they don't understand how the world works.
Yeah, that is true.
Like Afghanistan. So we were there for 20 years, and for numerous years after I left Afghanistan, I said, we're not going to make any difference in the normal Afghan life unless we stay there multi-generationally, whether that be 60 years, 80 years, 100 years or more. Because you see how Germany was and how Japan was after World War II, where they still had people that grew up, either learning from Hitler or learning from Hitler. And we're still in Japan and Germany quite heavily, and we pretty much effectively stomped out feeling at that point. You know what? We have little enclaves, especially in Japan, of people protesting U.S. military bases and stuff, but that doesn't really change anything. So anyway, like I was saying, Afghanistan, I always said for the last 10 years, since I had my experiences there, it was a multi-generational war, and I feel like we wouldn't have made any sort of difference for the standard Afghan civilian unless we stayed there 60, 80, or 100 years. And what I mean by that is, unless we had the 70 or 80-year-old elder in the village as the only one that, even as him or her, but usually him, obviously, with him only knowing U.S. presence in his country and what we've taught him, that's the only way we'd make any sort of dent against the tribal and warlordism in that country.
You see, being someone from the region, I just don't think anyone would have, even if America was there for our next 100 years, Afghanistan would have been able to bounce back and just not have the same value. That I guess the whole point is so they could kind of change in a bit, or because most of the principles that they believe in are religious or cultural, and these things won't really go away in 100 years, for example. Maybe a few centuries.
I think they would.
Like the British were in India for 200 years. You don't really see, you don't see the locals giving up their religion, for example, or the culture.
I mean, you still see a more watered down version of how India was, now. You still see, heavy.
I think with Japan, now that Japan is seeing how China is coming out, becoming one of the biggest superpowers, Japan is militarizing itself more, which we should be afraid of that, but knowing what they can do.
Japan militarizing like they are now is all at the behest of the U.S. in my mind, because we want them to be like an actual partner in the region. They can't be a partner in the region unless they actually, a little bit.
Yeah, Japan is the richest ally that we have. It is it has the best economy. Not even UK, it is Japan.
And it's crazy being in Japan. I spent quite a bit of time in both Okinawa and mainland Japan, and it's crazy crazy westernized, even to the point where I went to a KFC one time. I forget which town I was in. But I went to a KFC and I was talking to the people there, and they all spoke English. And I was like, hey, this is crazy seeing it. Because I was a young kid at the time. I was like 22, 23, and maybe even 21. And I was like, it's crazy seeing a KFC in Japan. And they're like, oh, no, dude. Like, you wouldn't
KFC is
imagine it.
international. KFC is everywhere.
They're like, you wouldn't believe it. We celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm like, no, you guys don't. You don't celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas. Thanksgiving is a made up, U.S. holiday, and Christmas is a Christian holiday. And they're like, no, we do Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm like, what do you guys do for the food? And they're like, we get KFC catered to our house. And they said getting KFC catered to your house for Thanksgiving and Christmas is so popular that you have to get on the wait list like a year in advance to make sure that you get your KFC for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, we really did beat you guys in that war. And
like, I'll tell you, like in Pakistan, KFC is pretty famous also, but every other local store, like they have like copied it and they made their own zinger, for example. Like the KFC zinger burger is like everywhere. It's just like a staple in Pakistan now. But anyways, moving on to like shifting our focus to Ukraine. Like what led you to be part of it? Oh, you want to stay in?
To touch on that.
Okay, cool. Go back. Because I know that you told me. I just like. I remember you telling me that you wanted to go to Pakistan, and then you wanted to maybe like help some people that you knew from Afghanistan or something. And then for a month, I didn't hear from you, and I thought, oh my God, he went to Pakistan without me, because I literally that during that time I was planning on going to Pakistan, and then you told me that you were in Ukraine, and I was just shocked how that, because that conflict just started and you just went there, like, so
so like a couple wild things with Afghanistan. So of course you guys saw that we left August 2021 at the end of August there. And what I'd like to bring up for that, what I noticed personally as a veteran with a lot of research experience also, when we left, if you guys watch the videos, there's one specific video I remember always laughing at, and it's when a bunch of Taliban guys after we left, so late night August 31st, early September 1st, 2021, where we left, they had a bunch of State Department CH-46 helicopters, which were kind of like a Navy and Marine Corps version of a Army CH-47. It was a twin rotor helicopter. And one of them that had been used to evacuate people from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul in 2021 was also previously used to evacuate people from the U.S. Embassy in Saigon in 1970, according to the tail number, which is kind of like a serial number for the aircraft. And I always thought that was kind of funny and like a government way of showing like, ha 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 ha, we're not leaving. Because obviously we stayed in Southeast Asia till now, 50 years later. So anyway, the Taliban walked into this hangar, and the first guy that walked in was very Caucasian looking, was wearing a baseball cap, which they didn't generally do before the withdrawal, was wearing a face mask, wearing a t-shirt, a plate carrier, carrying an M4, and wearing what seemed to be to me Lawa hiking tennis shoes, which I wouldn't think Afghans at the time would have access to. And it was funny because he walked in first like he was leading the group of people. And right before that, I'd also heard that the CIA supposedly burned down their black site near Kabul. And that, of course, when the Taliban, I forget what the name of the prison was near Kabul, but when they took over the prison near Kabul, they killed all the ISIS guys inside of it. And I always thought that was kind of funny because we've been helping the Taliban fight ISIS since 2018 or 19. And you could read articles about that dating back to that time. But anyway, so of course, with that being said, the Taliban were like, we're going to fight ISIS, this, that, and the other. And we're going to abide by what we said in the Doha Agreement and not let Afghanistan be a hotbed for terrorism. Come July 31st, 2022, which was the day before I left Ukraine the first time, you saw that Ayman al-Zawahiri got killed in Kabul by a Hellfire missile, right?
Yeah.
And it was in a home that was associated with or owned by elites associated with Saludin Haqqani, part of the Haqqani network of the Taliban. And the Haqqani network is kind of like the more conservative, hardline, or coalition.
And they're based in Pakistan. I think they recently jailed him. Yeah, they recently jailed him, but that was totally not related to Afghanistan or other. There's something totally different that they jailed him for.
Sure. Yeah, but so we killed Bin Laden's number 2 in his house in Kabul, and I think like the award for information that led to his killer capture was like $25 million, and I was like, man, that's kind of weird that we could kill Zawahiri and Haqqani network. And then I don't know if you heard yesterday or not, but the Taliban said that they killed the ISIS leader that plotted Kabul suicide bombing that happened, directly before we left. And I'm like,
that was pretty tragic.
Yeah, the suicide bombing was pretty bad, and obviously, with all those people trying to come through Abbey Gate, something like that was bound to happen. And there's a lot of weird things to say about what happened there, and what I've heard from different people. But I think it's really funny that the Taliban were like, yeah, we killed the ISIS leader behind the bombing at Abbey Gate, and at the same time, I think like the Taliban special forces guys aren't anywhere near that good. Their intelligence gathering capability is not anywhere near that good. And for anybody that says we're still not in Afghanistan, kind of like picking and choosing where to use the Taliban and kind of like aiming them towards different objectives, just doesn't understand the situation on the ground.
So do you think that the Taliban can be an American ally in the future? Like, do you see it happening? I know they're just not with it at the moment. Even the relationship with American relationship with Pakistan are in a bit in hot fire because of the whole Afghanistan withdrawal issue. So do you see us working with them?
I can see not us working with them overtly, in the world's eye, as much as it kind of already seems like it. We just don't like to say that we are. But working covertly with Taliban and kind of directing them towards what we want them to do is definitely something we've been doing, already for 40 years. When it was the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Soviets. It's funny because after the withdrawal, I read that, I forget the past-due term for it, but the ISIS members in Afghanistan, ISIS-K, ISIS in the Khorasan province, was calling the Taliban fake Mujahideen and saying that they were in America's pocket. So I think what we did as part of the Doha agreement, we're like, hey, Taliban, we're going to give you all these items, all these firearms, all these vehicles, some helicopters, some aircraft, and all this ammo. Obviously, the Afghan national government, corrupt. It was not very useful American foreign policy. And we're like, hey, Taliban, if you listen to us, we'll give you all this stuff. You just have to do what we say, and then you can pretend that you won. And I think that's kind of what's happening in Afghanistan right now.
So what do you think? So do you think that America left all the weaponry there? It was part of this, or is that what you're trying to say? But they left a lot of stuff.
No, so obviously the stuff that we left was supposed to be used by the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. And I mean, there was some stuff that some different private military companies left at the Hamid Karzai airport, like Daniel Defense, civilian contract, Mark 18 uppers, some lasers and some red dots and some night vision stuff. But for the most part, what we left in Afghanistan was earmarked, if not already being used by Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. And
Afghan they were, right after the war, they were flying some of these helicopters and throwing people off those helicopters also. Just I don't know how they were able to fly it. That's a totally different topic. We have to look into it, but that happened also. But anyways, let's just move on from the Afghanistan topic. let's just go on how you like what motivated you
Real
to
quick,
like.
the guys playing those were, former Afghan, National Army or Afghan Air Force guys, and you can see from the pictures from the Afghan withdrawal till now. A lot of the Taliban guys have quite obvious Western training, whether it be, trigger finger discipline, how they carry their
Oh
rifle.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Some of them speak. Some of them were speaking like British English, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was just out of like what is going on. Like I just felt like it was another cover up, or it was
Yeah.
just being
It
done
is.
by NATO was maybe involved in it. Like all these Western powers are
Sure. Yeah.
also involved. Like they're fighting each other just for the military industrial complex. Like though they could get like sell more weaponry or
So
something. I don't
basically,
know for the future.
we left because it was like an unpopular war in the
Yeah.
civilian eyes, and we wanted to take attention off Afghanistan. So we're like, okay, Taliban, it's your turn to listen to us. They're like, oh, cool, we can have all this 20-year-old stuff, and we're like, yep, you can have all that 20-year-old stuff, and they're like, all right, we'll take it. Yeah, so that's kind of.
So now let's move on to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So what made you like go there? Like what was it you like
So
thinking
like you
of
brought up
fighting
before,
communist?
yeah,
Say that again.
basically. So like what you brought up before, I had a bunch of friends, and including people that are, quite popular in the internet sphere, that were talking together in a group chat about going to Afghanistan pre or post withdrawal, and we were like trying to come up with a plan, trying to come up with like groups we were gonna contact, whether be in the Panjshir Valley or anything like that, and trying to come up with routes to get into the country, trying to map stuff out and that kind of thing. And we were all doing this while we were concurrently working our regular jobs or working in politics or whatever. And at that time, I was like a forklift driver. Then the war in Ukraine kicked off, and I kind of figured it would. But I remember specifically being at work and going to the break room one night, and I worked from 2:30 to 10:30 at night if I worked a standard 8-hour shift. It was like 9:30. I walked up and looked at my phone, and I'm like, "Holy fucking shit, guys, war!" And I ran back in the warehouse. I was like, "War, guys, war, 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 war." So me and a bunch of friends went to a bar and watched the invasion on TV whilst we were getting pretty drunk. Then after that, me and a buddy went back to his house, and we, if anybody knows Lord Stanley's in DeKalb, we bought a 6-pack of beer each at the bar when it was closing, and then we went back to his house and watched Bunker 530 on YouTube until like 7:30, 8:30 in the morning. Went to bed, woke up at like 12, and went back to work from 2:30 to 10:30. And at that time, like, you know how guys are, I had like numerous group chats already dedicated to information about the war in Ukraine. And I'm like, okay, how are we going to get there? What can we do to get there? What's our plan? What's our route in? And so I came to Ukraine the first time. So the invasion happened February 24th. Obviously, February is a short month. I forget if February ended last year, like the 27th to the 28th. But I was already in Eastern Europe by March 8th, 2022, and met up with a group of buddies, and our plan was to do medical and humanitarian the border. So we were at the Herbine border crossing between Poland and Ukraine, and we did humanitarian work, we did medical work. At one point, we did a gunshot wound victim who was if I remember right, a student or a medical student from the Congo, as a black lady who got shot by Russians at a checkpoint. I want to say outside Kiev, quite possibly. And I remember we worked on her for about a day, and little kids. And at that time, the International Red Cross, I want to say, had set up a checkpoint at the Herbine border crossing. So we were handing out, stuffed animals for kids, toys for kids, food, coffee, that kind of thing, and working at that border crossing for a number of weeks. We were doing that kind of thing. And at that time, we also sent a group of us into Lviv to teach like combat medical stuff to a group of humanitarian workers in Lviv. And about a week later, we're like, well, the border crossing is getting less busy. You know, we can move into country and not have to worry about refugees and not have to worry about helping people as much at the border. So we moved into Lviv for about a week and a half. And at that point, we noticed that the humanitarian work in Lviv was kind of winding down. So me and a bunch of other buddies transitioned into training forces, and later on transitioned into training, police from Kherson, Ukrainian Army units, Ukrainian Marine units, once again Ukrainian Army units, and then fighting. Then me leaving, coming back, going back to the same Ukrainian Army unit and fighting again. But for my reasons for going to Ukraine, of course, I hate authoritarianism, I hate communism, and I've seen Russians, running hammer and sickle patches. I've seen them raising the Soviet victory flag over different Ukrainian towns that they've captured earlier in the war, including Kherson. And I just find that they are still communist and they're still authoritarian. Authoritarian. They just kind of cloak it in a new or old, in that case, Russian flag. What Putin has been trying to do since he got into power is trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. And I'm also ethnically Russian, and I've had, I had a great grandpa that fought in the Russo-Japanese War, the 1904-1905 Russo-Japanese War, as a cavalry guy. He got wounded and came back to Russia, and he was from around St. Petersburg, and they said, "Hey, bud, we're going to give you an estate." And he was like, "I'm okay," and traveled all the way east, across Russia, into Siberia, into Alaska, into Canada.
Oh, wow.
His port of entry into the U.S., if you look at the paperwork, was Detroit, and not New York City like everybody else's.
Most people, yeah.
So he went from Detroit into Chicago, where he stayed and was a wagon driver and truck driver, teamster, and that kind of thing. A former Russian cavalry guy, and he fucking noped out of Russia, I want to say like probably 1907, 1908. And I'm also Polish. And obviously this war has Poland right on the border as well. And a lot of Ukraine is former Poland, including areas that my ancestors were probably from. And so it's also, it's a fight against authoritarianism. It's a fight against modern day communism. It's a fight against, people running the hammer and sickle flag. It's a fight to Western Europe. It's a fight to protect Poland. It's a giant conglomerate of things. And it's also, for me who enjoys fighting, it's also pretty fun.
So I'll just say it's kind of personal for you. What do you think is the role of maybe the Ukrainian allies? I should maybe structure it differently. Don't you think that just because NATO is trying to have influence all over on the borders of Russia, for example, they feel threatened? For example, Finland just is about to join NATO, and Finland has an 800-kilometer border, that's the second biggest after Ukraine. Or is it after China, I guess? Come back to that. But okay. Don't you feel they feel threatened in a way because of NATO? Yeah, and the second part of this would be, what do you think is the role of the international community in trying to stop this conflict from, escalating more than it has already?
So my personal thoughts on escalation of the conflict is that Russia is kind of shown how ass their entire military is. And I would be completely surprised, since my experience here, to see if any of their units, whether it's the Air Forces, Navy, Army, or anything else, could escalate the conflict to the point where a Western country would have to get involved overtly militarily, with troops on the ground. They're having a hard enough time taking towns, smaller than the ones we went to college, in eastern Ukraine, 100 miles, 150 miles from the border of Russia. So I don't think they have any ability to escalate the conflict past what they've already done. And all of their talk of escalation is just ego. Pride is a big thing in Eastern Europe, especially Russia, and just trying to out any supposed capability they might have, whether that's true or not. So I think the role of Western countries and NATO as a whole at this point is still just funneling weapons into this country for us to use, because they don't really necessarily have to use Western military active duty troops, because everybody with experience is already here. I mean, we have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years of combat experience worth of guys here that are no longer in their home militaries, and I feel like sending dudes from their home military still active duty guys would be more possibly of a hindrance, because they don't have the experience. Everybody here has previous combat experience or military experience during a wartime.
So do you see this war ending anytime? Because you see that America is putting so much money into the war, and so the money that maybe it could be using domestically on infrastructure, on people. But do you see us putting so much money in and this war not going anywhere, or it becoming nuclear in the future?
The way the news talks about what we're given is on a cash basis, but we're not given cash. What we're giving is surplus equipment that's already been paid for, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So you see them running, Humvees. You see them running M113 armored personnel carriers. You see them running, like M16 rifles, even M4 and M4A1 rifles. You see them running TOWs. You see them running earlier generation Javelin missiles. So it's not money that we're giving them; it's gear, and the money they talk about on the news as is what that gear costs new. And obviously, a lot of this gear, especially stuff with electronics, has a shelf life, and we have to use it at some point. Unless we just throw it away, and might as well use it in this instance, completely degrade what was supposed to be the second best military in the world. It's super funny that people look at it in a money perspective, because it's not a money perspective. It's a what this surplus gear costs new perspective.
I think my point of view on this is maybe coming from, you said, the war in Afghanistan wasn't popular anymore, and they had to sell their weaponry or give their weaponry in another way or form. That's why I think we are involved in Russia. That's what my opinion is. But then again, what do you feel about America trying to ask different countries to actually give military aid to Ukraine? Forget about even so. America recently asked Egypt to make weaponry for Ukraine, and UK was smuggling weapons from Pakistan to Ukraine, because countries like India, Pakistan are for the first time neutral in this conflict, something that they agree on, I guess. Mm-hmm. Even China, they're not showing full support to Russia right now, but they're staying in the middle. So what do you have to say about, for example, the Western powers that are involved in the war, trying to convince these other nations that are neutral to get involved in this war?
So it's funny to see, I watch all the different OSINT channels on Twitter, and I watch, people on YouTube, and, sometimes even Facebook and stuff like that. But you see, Turkish stuff, Pakistani stuff, Indian stuff, stuff from all the different Western powers. And then, on Russia's side, you see, sometimes China, sometimes Iran. And then you brought up Egypt also, where that Air Force kid leaked a bunch of classified documents, and it showed that Egypt was trying to help Russia. And now, all of a sudden, they're trying to send stuff to Ukraine. So obviously the U.S. was like, oh, hey, you're caught. It's out in the open now. you better send some to Ukraine.
I
I
think
think
it's
it's
mostly because they get their wheat from Russia, and Russia is kind of helping them in making their nuclear power from electricity, they say. I think that is one of the reasoning of why they were helping. That's how they were helping. And then, but anyways, I do get what you're saying at that point. But yeah, like,
it just shows that the U.S. is still able to delineate to the rest of the world, like, hey, this is the right side and this is the wrong side, and this is what we're going to do if you want to be on the right side. And it's just funny to see all these separate countries falling in line when people are like, oh no, the U.S. is, down. The U.S. is popular, not a superpower anymore. China and Russia somehow is already taking over. I think it shows people are very premature in their diagnosis of the world.
have you heard about the allegations on maybe both sides using chemical weapons in this war?
Sure. From what I've seen, I remember a video you brought up a number of months ago where that guy was like trying to swim across a creek, and that was an F1 grenade, and the guy just got hit by shrapnel and was, twitching because he was bleeding real bad. But as far as I've seen from all accounts and from personal knowledge from people on the ground, is the only thing that's been used so far chemically, just chemical weapon style, is tear gas or riot gas, CS gas. I mean, people talk about like white phos as a chemical too, and obviously Russia is heavily using white phosphorus, especially out east, which is pretty fucking nasty to be honest. But chemical warfare is really not something that happens. It hasn't happened since Iraq, trying to mess with the Kurds, or maybe in some instances Assad in Syria. But I still haven't seen those, confirmed 100%.
What do you have to say about China maybe trying to be like what do you call it? Trying to make peace between Russia and Ukraine right now. They're trying. I think they did try to talk before. Russia and Ukraine were very close to having a deal before, and Boris Johnson came out of nowhere and stopped them from having that discussion. So, but what do you feel China, the role China is playing right now? Are you in favor of them, like maybe talking things out, or do you see this conflict like maybe not ending for the next maybe 5-10 years?
So with China, I mean, obviously everybody's seen China's human rights abuses for the last, what are we at, like 74 years, 75 years since the Communist Party took over, whether it be with the Great Famine, uh, what was the other one called? Like, it wasn't the Great Reset, modern as, the genocide of the Uyghur Muslim population in China. But they're not interested in humanitarian type stuff or human based stuff, or, we've even seen them like, weld doors of apartment buildings shut during the COVID pandemic lockdown scare, whatever. So they're not interested in the humanitarian aspect. What they're interested in is gaining as much power for themselves as possible. And I believe what they see in Eastern Europe is helping them as most is, of course, Russia and China have always been kind of enemies, and China would like to see a degraded Russia so they could be the number two, the number two superpower, that secondary power. But they don't want to see Russia defeated so badly. We completely take our mind and eyes off Europe and off of Russia and just completely turn them on to China. So they're trying to, at this point, in my mind, salvage any sort of capability that Russia still has, salvage any type of scare focus that Russia might bring to the West, so they can, move on with their goals, which is, taking Taiwan and moving across the Pacific. I know we've seen China even try to move towards Solomon Islands, which I am very in favor for, because I'd like to fight in the Solomon Islands in the past year, where they've been talking to people even in like Harar, Guadalcanal. and Harar is where like Henderson Airfield was during the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942 and 3. China is just trying to salvage at this point, I believe, Russia, so the West could still focus on Russia a little bit, so China can still build up, its military and financial backing for the invasion of Taiwan and the move into the Pacific. So I don't think they're trying to mediate shit. They're just trying to, get a leg up in, foreign policy.
I think we'll end at that point. Thank you so much for speaking out to us. We would hopefully speak again if you're still there in Ukraine. And stay safe there, my man.
Oh yeah, I'll be fine. Don't
Take
worry
care,
about
man.
me.
Bye.
All right, buddy.